Hi, I'm Caputo, and this is the story. In the latest issue of the Chicago Reporter, we took a look at some substandard housing in Chicago, and it's all subsidized by the federal government. And I first came across this story one day when I was down at City Hall about a year and a half ago by accident. There was a group of tenants who were protesting at a plan commission meeting saying, hey, why is Leon Finny Jr. Allowed to set public policy when he runs buildings that don't even have working heat and that have, rats and all sorts of terrible conditions. And so for a long time I wanted to look a little deeper into what was happening in these in this particular building, and what was happening with Leon Finny Jr., who has really been a powerhouse in collecting public money from at the local level, the state level, and the federal level. And essentially what I found was that, I'm not the first person to look into what was happening with Finny and his organization, the Woodlawn Organization and the Woodlawn Community Development Corporation. For decades, the group has been under fire for misusing public money. And what I found in my investigation is that that continues. There's a whole lot of public money that's been poured into projects that are incomplete, and a lot of land that's been transferred in good faith over to the organization in hopes that they would help to reverse blight in the Woodlawn neighborhood that is perhaps more blighted than when he first acquired it. And in this piece I also wanted to put the whole issue in perspective, and so I took a broader look at project-based Section 8 housing in Chicago. And one of the first most interesting things that I found was how valuable these units are. They're mostly multi-family buildings that are spread all around the city, and the subsidies are tied to the buildings, and most of them were created, those subsidies were created in the 70s and in the 80s, and there's no longer a program like this. And so as Chicago Housing Authority has started tearing down public housing, these apartment buildings have become one of the last stable sources of housing for families. And currently in Chicago there are more than 25,000 non-senior apartments that are subsidized through this housing stock, and they're all owned by private landlords. And what we found was that a number of them are increasingly falling into disrepair, and HUD has really been playing this delicate game of trying to lean on landlords, but not lean so hard that they decide to get out of the housing business, because if they do, then these subsidies will be lost if they put them on the private market.
So what was the process of your investigation?
Well, the first thing that I did was I started looking around for data, and HUD had a lot of the federal inspection scores online, so that those were pretty easy to pull down. And the harder part of the piece was FOIAing, using the Freedom of Information Act to get at what was really happening with the Woodlawn Organization and the Woodlawn Community Development Corporation's finances. So we put out I put out FOIAs at the federal level to multiple agencies and to state agencies, and even to the Chicago Housing Authority, because the Woodlawn Organization is a property manager for them, to get a sense of, what are auditors saying about the way that this group is managing money. And then also, I did a lot of pulling property records and deeds, and to try to understand what was happening with a lot of these real estate transactions that were really made in an effort to help improve Woodlawn. And so, once I pulled all the records, then I went on the tour and checked out each of the properties and just tried to get a sense of, is this working? Is all of this public investment working?
And what would you say is the answer to that?
I would say that it's, it's a mixed bag, and I think that our article, our profile on Leon Finny Jr., Following Finny, really hits on that. Who is this guy? For as many properties that are a success and are, you're generating taxes and are, stable parts of the community, there are other properties that are just a mess, you know, and the city even in December added him to a list of scofflaw landlords, which essentially is under an ordinance that was passed last year that has not, they're just starting to enforce, that's called the slumlord ordinance, and these are organizations or landlords that are routinely in housing court for building problems, bad building conditions.
Have you heard anything back from Finny or any of his organizations?
I haven't, but I have heard through the grapevine that there's been some talk in Woodlawn, you know, with the organization about about what's really happening there, and so I'm not sure. I haven't heard anything beyond that.
Okay. What do you wish that you had a chance to look into more deeply during the investigation?
Well, our investigation is still ongoing, and we have a couple of pieces that are in the story that are mentioned, but we really would like to expand on them, and so stay tuned. There's still more to come.